Hello friends, my name is Doug. Welcome to Third Stall Garage, a channel about car restoration, shop projects, and automotive repair. Today's project is a 2012 Jeep Wrangler. It is my daily driver. Love this truck, 170,000 miles. It has the 3.6 liter Pentastar V6 engine in it. And it is time for me to do a whole lot of work to the engine. I know there will be a lot of people out there that go dump the 3.6, put in something bigger and more fun, and the engine does what I need it to do. It's enough power for fun and daily driving. This isn't a great big rock climbing truck. It's a daily driver with some occasional trails. And so I'm gonna dive in and do a timing chain replacement with all the sprockets, rocker arms, push rods, and a few other maintenance things along the way. The main reason I'm heading to do this is because I'm fairly sure it has a head gasket leak. I have coolant that is disappearing. It's not leaking, it's not going in the oil, and so I think it's going out the tailpipe. So we're gonna take the heads off, bring them to a machine shop, have them clean, then we're gonna put new head gaskets in. If you can see on my workbench, I've got all kinds of boxes. We're gonna need new oil, coolant, water pump, gaskets, all of that. I've got about $2,000 into parts. This is August of 2025 that I'm doing this. So obviously you're doing it later, prices may change. I am not a professional mechanic, but have done all of my own auto repair, mechanical engineer by training. So I'm a balance between a professional doing this and somebody who's picking up a wrench for the first time. It's going to be a big job. At the end, I'll let you know about how many hours it took me. There are a lot of videos out there which show disassembly, particularly getting down to the rocker arms. I'm also going to replace the oil filter housing, because that's a common problematic spot on these engines. And then my hope is I've got 100,000 miles of maintenance free for a Jeep, maintenance free miles after this. I'm going to do a time lapse for the beginning of it, just because pulling the whole battery tray out and all the hoses, draining the coolant and the oil, I don't think will be as interesting or helpful. There are a lot of videos out there that show that if you need, but once I get down to the engine work, I'll detail that out a little bit more for you. So play the intro. If you find this video helpful, I would love it if you would subscribe, maybe leave a comment below of what you liked about it. That will help other people find helpful videos like this as well. Also working on a Beetle and Mustang restoration. If you want to follow those along, you can. All right, let's dive into it and get this work done. Here's an update of where I am. Battery tray came out of this, which is a significant challenge. There's a bunch of 10 mil from this guy by the power steering reservoir, all the way back to, there's 1, 2, 3 on the firewall, a couple side ones. I ended up taking the power distribution block, unplugging all of these, swinging them off to the side. You've got this, it's part of the, what do you call it, the emissions control, evaporative control emissions. You can take a few of those things apart, and then strapped them to the back and strapped them to the side to get them out of the way. Then there's a variety of hoses that go up underneath here, coolant hoses that go across the back. Just methodically take a lot of pictures as to where they go, where they connected to. I like taking little videos because then you can pause and zoom in. Next, I think I wanted to get rid of this guy, but I don't know where he goes in the back yet. I got to figure that out. Next, I think I'm going to start working on the intake. I'm going to take the air compressor, blow all of this out, get all of the dust and dirt out, because I want to keep any debris from going inside the engine. So doesn't matter to you, but I'm going to wrap up today and I'll get back to it again tomorrow. Got probably an hour and a half into it so far. The driver's side valve cover is off. We were working on the passenger side valve cover. They're identical except for the back of the passenger has a PCV valve. That is the top of it right there. So that is, you can see that hose right there. Yeah, can you hold that? Right there where my wrench is, there's a small machine bolt. Is that guy right there? This is a T25. And then on the bottom here, right there, you can just see the head of the second machine bolt. Right below that is the PCV valve. And I'm pretty sure the PCV valve spans the joint between the valve cover and the head, so it has to come off first. To get that off, I took my 1/4-inch wrench and a little T25 bit and taped it on with the angled part of the wrench towards the tip, and that allows me just enough to get in there to get those machine head screws out. This is what the PCV valve looks like. Should rattle when you shake it if you have it out. I just replaced mine a little while ago, so I don't need to replace it, but if you get this far, it is wise to replace it. And just so you know, getting these little guys out may be the worst part of the whole job. So good luck to you. Valve covers are off. This is a good time to inspect all of your lobes. Make sure that they are all in good looking condition. There's no grooves, marks, scraping marks, things like that. That one has a small, I don't know if that's a smudge. That line down the middle is from the oil. So I want to think about that. And then on my driver's side, similar, the valve cover is off, and it's a good time to inspect all of those lobes too. So next we need to set it to top dead center, and then we are going to take the crank pulley off because we're going to replace the timing chain. In order to do that, you need this hold down tool that has 4 big pins that locks into the crank pulley. You put a 1/2-inch ratchet on that, and then a breaker bar, and that goes up against your fender there. That holds it back while you have a 27mm with another breaker bar, which turns it. And we did that off camera, but it is loose already. And then I held this one while Dale held that one, and we got the crankshaft bolt loose. Next, we're gonna rotate it to top dead center. There are all kinds of videos on that if you want, but basically these 2 hash marks need to be pointed at each other on the right head. The arrows go out, and then you should see that there are 4 holes, 1, 2, 3, 4, that are all in the up position. So arrows out on the right side. On the left or driver, the arrows are pointing in, the hashtags are out. You see these grooves on the top, and the 4 holes in the top of the cam are also up as well. Then you can buy your timing tool locking kit. They sell them real cheap off Amazon. Those slide in there until they engage with the teeth, and that helps lock it in place so that nothing moves while you're taking the timing cover or whatever you need to take apart. Each timing tool says left and right on it. This one says left, and now that we have it at top dead center, it slides in there, but it is in this set, it is a nice tight fit, so we kind of had to tap it in with a mallet. And it's locked in. Now those will not, like, you don't want to use those to lock it in place to pull the crank bolt loose. They're just plastic, so they'll just hold it from moving as you bump it. But I think we're to the point now where we can pull that crank pulley off and verify the crank's in the right spot. Okay, so we have what we think is all the 10mm bolts out. You just got to work your way all the way around. The water pump is out. This coolant passage is out. There are 5 bolts that are 1/2 inch, not 10mm, that go up from underneath the car. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I think we should be able to pry this thing off. And it should come loose. So I'm guessing it's not going to be real happy about coming loose. Once you have all of those bolts removed, getting the timing chain cover off proved to be problematic for us. So there are a couple spots where you can pry. There is one you can pry off of the tab there. There's another one down on the side, right about here. There is another one. Sorry about that. The very bottom, if you get at it right about there, you can. We spent, I don't know, felt like an hour, probably wasn't that long, prying here with a decently long screwdriver. And then as we did, we would like stick a screwdriver in here to hold it out. And then we just could not get it to go, and it felt like we were gonna crack the cover or we missed a bolt. So spent a long time on that. What ended up doing it was a longer bar, and getting the longer pry bar right in here with the case here and over here. And then as I pried, you could see the cover flex, and you could hear the glue start to let go. And now it's to the point where it's loose. It's still kind of glued in on the bottom, and we still have to slide it off of the crank because the crank seal is there. But now we should be able to kind of wiggle it back and forth.
5 bolts from the bottom. I don't know if you actually said that, but if
we did.
You don't do that, you're really old.
Yeah, I'm gonna show you just so you know for sure. So there are 5 bolts from the bottom that you can see right along the edge there that have to come off. They go into the timing chain cover. The extra bolt right there, the 6th and the 7th one right there, do not need to come out. Those we took out just because we weren't 100% sure. But definitely those 5 along the front of the upper oil pan have to come off. Still a little sealant hanging on somewhere. That's like a fish picture. If you hold it up closer, it looks bigger. All right, there's the timing chain cover off. You can see both of the timing chains, and then on the bottom is the short chain which drives the oil pump. One of the major reasons we did this next is we wanted to verify that the crankshaft is in the right position. So if you see right in the middle of the picture, there's a little divot or a dimple drill mark in the crankshaft, and it is at the 9 o'clock position. So I'm probably holding the camera sideways for you. Sorry. So this would be, my phone is now upright. And if you look, that dimple is in the 9 o'clock position, which should verify that our chains are at top dead center, which means we can leave things the way they are, and we're gonna start taking the chains and cams out. Okay, the right timing chain, once I took the guides out, it just came out very easily. The way the driver's timing chain is, I can't figure out how to get that apart. So I'm going to take the cam phasers and the, I think it's called the oil control valve or bolt, off. I'm replacing all of these along with the timing chain kit, all from Melling. So I'm going to set these aside carefully, but likely I won't be using them. And then the cam phaser, this is the exhaust, or no, sorry, the intake one, it's labeled that way. The cam phaser will come off, and that gives me plenty of slack in the chain here to get the chain guides off. There's some torque bolts that hold those on, as well as the, I don't know, the little oil driven tensioner, the chain tensioner. All right, so next step will be to get the cams out. I'll tell you how we loosened the cam phasers. There's a hex slot in the camshafts right there that you can get a large crescent on, and then I think this is a 36 millimeter, but I don't know for sure. I don't have one, but I have a 1 3/8, which is very similar. So basically you put the crescent wrench on, hold it, and then you can use your large socket to get the cam phaser loose. You want to make sure you don't turn the camshafts because we're set at top dead center now, and we want to keep them that way. Next, we pulled the lower intake off. There were 8 millimeter bolts that held it. One of those little push pin Christmas tree, that guy right there on the back. And then to remove the fuel line, it's one of these little horseshoe clips where you just got to pry the white clip out, all the way out, and then it will pull off of the fuel line. You can set that aside. Next, we are taking the cams off, and that's a T30 for those 8 bolts that hold down the cam caps. Make sure you label them so you know which position they came from, and then you can pull your cam out and inspect it. Important thing to note, those wheels on the back have magnets coated into them, so don't let them near each other or near other magnets as you take them out. The right hand side, or the passenger side, when the engine's at top dead center, these will all be relaxed and all the valves will be closed, so they should come out fairly easily. On the driver's side, one of them, maybe both, I forget which, the valve's already open, and so the cam's under pressure a little bit, so you'll be able to see as you loosen them up that the cam will want to pop up, and that's the valve pushing up on it. So loosen those ones a little bit more carefully. Then you can set them off to the side, wrap them in rags, put them in carpet or cardboard box or whatever. Take care of them. Covers are out, or cams are out, the rockers and lifters are out. We're now on to the exhaust. There are 2 10 millimeter bolts on the top of the exhaust flange, and then it looks kind of like the exhaust manifold goes on a lip and then the top bolts in. So if we get the top bolts out, it may slide up and out. We'll see what it looks like once we're done. Looks like both of those are coming. I'm just using my 10 millimeter closed box end wrench and tapping on it with a hammer. Passenger side head is out. what we ended up doing is taking off these two 10mm bolts, and then with a really long pry bar from below, pounded up on the bottom of this flange. But then also to get the exhaust to flex, I don't know if this is necessary, but it's what we ended up doing. We took this exhaust mount right here, which I just took down and spun, but that attaches the exhaust to the bottom of the car, and then also used a jack. Also used a floor jack with a 2x4 to push up onto the exhaust, just to give a little upward force, and then tapped on it with a long flat pry bar, and then it popped up. Tap on the bottom of this, then this popped up. The bottom of this exhaust, the cat flange, rides right in this groove here in this bracket that is attached to the head. Dale, can you hold that? So that cat flange rides right in there, so you do not need to get these two bolts out. Just these top two, pound up on it and it slides out, and then I'm assuming the opposite is to reassemble it. So we got one done, time to get the second one done. Driver head should pop up. I'll be a little careful where I pry from so I don't scratch any surfaces. Do know we have one sensor yet. Oh, it's hooked on the exhaust here. We have one sensor on the back yet that we couldn't really get to, so I'm gonna hold it here while Dale takes that off. Dale's gonna stop filming because this is heavy.
Just be careful, don't cut your thumb.
So both of the heads are out. You can see, looks to me, although I'm not an expert in reading this, that there are a lot of parts on the head gasket where coolant had gotten through and wore away a lot of that black sealing surface. So tomorrow morning, the heads are going off to Napa Machine Shop in Grand Rapids to get checked, pressure tested, and probably decked. And in the meantime, I've got a lot of cleaning work ahead of me. So the gasket's got to come off. Got to very carefully clean the head mating surfaces. This is also my time to replace the oil filter housing and cooler with an all aluminum one because that one is prone to leaking. And then I just have a ton of cleaning to do. So I'm gonna spend the next while. You can see this is already done. This has not been done, just carefully scraping off the sealant and then scrubbing it using brake parts cleaner and little tiny pieces of red Scotch-Brite. Red is decently aggressive, so I'm not going to use that on the head surfaces. I will use something softer on that. So time for me to get to work and just scrub for a while. In order to replace the lower chain that drives the oil pump, you need to take off the oil pan, the lower oil pan, and the upper oil pan, which I have sitting on the bench here. There's no gasket in these, and It's just an RTV, and it was stuck on unbelievably hard. So I struggled with this for a long time. Part of it is you need to get these 4 bolts off of like the bell housing. So those are 15 millimeter. And then I didn't realize there's a little hole in the bottom that has these little rubber plugs in them that cover up these 10 millimeters that go up from here up into the bottom of the block. So there are those 2. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. 21 bolts. And then once you get all of them out, this much of it sticks out the front. So that hangs out right here just a little bit. And I pounded on it with a dead blow. I pounded on it with a wooden board with a mini sledge. I tried to get a screwdriver in there, and it was incredibly hard. Finally, I ended up getting a very thin screwdriver in on this side, and you can see I put a couple small scratches in it. And I've got this one to crack loose a little bit, and I let it sit, and I think that stressed all of this RTV enough that it started to let go. Eventually I could get the screwdriver in a little bit farther. It took me a long time to get one in on this side. Eventually I got it all the way out. Now, you do not need to take the bottom lower oil pan out. I took all the bolts off, and I spent an hour trying to get that thing off and could not get it off. So I just left it on. There's still about a half quart of oil in there. So I'm gonna clean up those bolts and put them back in and not take that lower oil pan off. My last job for tonight is to try to get this oil filter housing out. There are a couple hoses and a couple sensors on the back. And then there are these bolts, which I think are an E8. All right, so those bolts are an E8. My settlement goes down to E10, figures. So I'm gonna have to run out tomorrow and pick up an E8, and then I can keep going on that. And then I've got a lot more continued cleaning to do. I will need to scrub all the way around the oil pan, underneath the engine, scrub the oil pan, and then scrub the whole timing cover and get all of that clean. Pull the head gaskets off, clean those surfaces, then pull, once I get the tool, pull that out and start getting that ready. So I'm calling it a night tonight, and we'll be back at this tomorrow. Hello friends, I'm back, and that's another day. It's a beautiful day out. And I've got my E8 female Torx socket. That's hard to see. There we go. Which should allow me to take this off. It's interesting looking at how oily that is. I did not know that mine had been leaking, but makes me glad that I'm going to replace it. So my goal is going to be to remove these, pull it out, try to not have junk fall into the engine. So you get at that next. Here's the oil cooler. There are 5 of the E8 kind of male versions of the Torx. One coolant hose that if you hadn't disconnected it, you'll need to disconnect it here. I have heard from some that this can be prone to leaking when you reattach it. So they recommend taking like a paint pen and putting a mark on the clamp and on the hose, kind of like that, and then reassembling the hose clamp back into the exact same spot. 2 electrical connectors that will need to come off. There are 2 more wires that go to sensors in the valley one there and one there. Those can stay connected. And then a whole bunch of coolant and oil is going to drain out of it into the valley, which will just be a joy to clean. I've shop vacuumed most of the junk up, which I'm sure sent a nice mess of oily twigs and leaves into my shop vac. And now I'm going to start working with brake cleaner and shop rags to just clean that out and then clean all the mating surfaces, and then we'll install the new one. Here's the old oil filter housing. You can see it's all plastic, and the new one from Dorman seems really solid. Comes disassembled, so you need to install the gaskets underneath here. There's instructions on how to go about it, torquing them to 9 foot-pounds. Made me laugh. 9 pound-foot. And then you move the sensors over to the new housing. I did not know, but it comes with stickers to put on the car. Mine is a 2012 Jeep, but I will need to use the 2014 or newer oil filter, so that's going to be something for me to remember. So I'm about to install this in the valley. I have a decently clean at the bottom, but very clean where all of the mating surfaces are. This one looks a little dirty, but the O-ring, it's clean inside. The O-ring is what slides into that surface, and then I can move on to more cleaning. So fun. Look at that pretty block. So I'm done cleaning. I cleaned the bottom where the upper oil pan goes, and have it clean here on the bench too, all the way around. That's ready to go back together later. The top of the block is clean all the way around the timing cover. It just feels good with the new oil filter housing and cooler in there. Resist the urge to clean the top of the block with a Scotch-Brite pad. That's so hard for me. I want to scrub that with the Scotch-Brite pad so bad. But I've told that leaves fuzzies behind that ruin the mating surface and can cause leaks and will cause scratches and wear off edges and whatnot. So I did most of my cleaning with a ton of brake cleaner, and then I took a plastic scraper to scrape it, and then just scrubbed really rigorously with a cloth, and just got as clean as I could that way. So I am pretty much close to at the midway point. Obviously going back together with the oil cooler. Next, I'm going down to remove and replace the sprockets and the chain that drives the oil pump, and then the secondary chain that goes from the cam to the dual sprocket. So I can get that done. This morning I dropped the heads off at Napa to get checked, cleaned, and decked. Hopefully they'll be back in a day or two, and then I can start reassembling. So I've reinstalled the lower part of the timing chain set along with a hydraulic tensioner and the chain guide and the spring-loaded tensioner for the oil chain drive. Torqued the oil chain bolt to, I think it was 18 foot-pounds. Same thing for the idler bolt on the end, and then I will be able to reinstall the upper timing chain components once the heads come back from the shop. It is good to double check that the camshaft, there's a notch in the camshaft, and yeah, I think I'll be able to insert a better video of that in a second. To make sure that that hasn't moved as you've been torquing things. I had a hard time holding it back, so what I ended up doing was taking my old timing chain cog or gear, sliding that on to the crankshaft, and then I just grabbed that with the pliers and held it while I torqued the bottom bolt. So, little tip for you. So I think that's as far as I can go for right now with the timing chain set, but that does mean that I can reinstall and assemble the oil pan on the bottom. That can be next. For putting the Melling timing chain together, Melling Engine Parts has a really good video on YouTube. Chrysler Pentastar Engine timing chain install tips from Melling. If you use their kit, it really makes installation pretty easy. I recommend it. Well, when you install the lower oil pan and you're not putting the timing chain cover on for a while, you don't need to put RTV on the front of the upper oil pan. So that was a waste of RTV. Now you get to clean it off. Bummer pants. While I'm waiting for the heads to get done at the machine shop, I'm just going through cleaning everything, replacing all of the seals and gaskets that I can, getting them all laid out. So I'm replacing the spark plug tube seals in the valve cover gaskets, and you know, most of the gaskets are pretty easy to replace, like these on the end for the cam sensors. Yeah, I don't have the valve cover gasket on the bottom. Those all go in pretty easy. These valve tube seals, or excuse me, spark plug seals are a little tricky. So you want a fairly wide, blunt screwdriver. A really sharp one will just poke a hole through the seal, and you're just gonna angle it down in and pop the seal out the bottom. These are going really well. There, they're actually all out. Now, the cone shape side of the seal goes inside the valve cover. So when we install it, we're gonna hold the valve cover upside down, and then the cone shaped part, not the part that's open, the cone shaped part will actually stick up inside that recessed area. Now these are a little hard to get in, so a couple things that help. One is just take a little bit of silicone and put just a little bit of silicone in each one. That will lubricate it a little bit. And then I have a set of big old sockets, and you want the, basically I found that it works to take two larger ones and place it underneath the hole that you're pounding on to support it, so you're not just hammering on the valve cover. So if you can see, I've got a socket, got two sockets right there that are holding up the plastic cover right where I'm going to be pounding. And then I take one that's 1 1/8 or 1 1/16, and that is the right size for tapping it down. And then it's a little nerve-wracking because you're pounding on plastic, and it actually takes a fair amount of force to get them driven all the way in. Do your best to pay attention to getting them centered and level as they go in, because sometimes they will want to go diagonal on you. Sometimes they will want to go diagonal on you. That's what it should look like when it's seated properly, all of the right way. You can see how much of it is recessed. So I'll simply move on to the next one and do the next two. Heads are back from the machine shop. Don't they look pretty? Clean. Valves were pressure tested. Heads were decked. Checked for cracks, and I are ready to reassemble. Before I reassemble them, I forget what these bolts are called, oil galley bolts or whatever. So these are hidden behind the timing chain sprockets, and behind these bolts is an oil passage that goes the length of the head. These are, from what I read, known to work themselves loose, and then oil comes out and the valve train doesn't get oiled. There's a lot of pictures of people who have them, they pull the heads, the timing chain off, and these are threaded all the way out. They'll fall down into the timing chain, and then oil comes out here and you lose oil pressure in the engine. So I'm going to take these out, clean them, and then put a little red Loctite on them, put them back in. None of mine were out, but this one was finger tight. And that's it. So I'm glad I'm checking them. So I'm going to pull them out, clean them with brake cleaner, and then put a little red Loctite on them and tighten them back up. Heads are in the Jeep. Bolts are in and kind of finger tight. So now it's time for the torquing sequence. So here's an example for the left head. You're going to start here, center of the engine towards the firewall, and you go spiral. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So the first step is 22 foot-pounds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Then you step up to 33 foot-pounds. You go in a spiral. And then you're going to do 33 again. And I'm assuming that there's a forming of the head gasket or the crushing of that. That's part of that step. So 33 foot-pounds is your second step. 33 foot-pounds again is your third step. And then you're going to torque the bolts. You're going to rotate the bolts 125 degrees. It's great if you've got an angle torque wrench or a torque dial. If not, you need to do some measurements on with some angles. So that's step 4, and then you loosen all of them. Then you do 22 foot-pounds again, 33 again, 33 again, and then 5 degrees more, you're going to do 130 degrees. And so you'll do that to both heads. That was a lot of work. I feel good about how it went. I did both heads at the same time, so it was a constant pattern of I could methodically just keep going through it. It took me about 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Some of you will argue that I should have used torque with an angle finder on it or a degree wheel, and you are probably right. In my defense, here was my logic. 1, I don't have one. 2, I think I'm a pretty good sense of judge and distance and measurement, spatially stronger in that area. And if you do, like for the 130 degree, it's pretty easy to eyeball a 90, and then you simply need to do 40 degrees more, which is 5 degrees less than a 45 degree angle. So visually, I think I probably have it within 5 degrees. I feel good enough with that. If I had those tools, I would definitely do it, but I imagine there's a lot of mechanics out there slapping these things together that still aren't as careful as I'm being. My rationale, do what you want. Feel free to put your hate comments below. But heads are in and torqued, time to move on. With the heads in next, I moved on to attaching the catalytic converters. The 2 bottom bolts were put on the heads while it was off. So it's a matter of getting the catalytic converter in place. I had to kind of pound it down with a hammer and keep tapping it, but keep trying to check the bolts to make sure that the bolts go through. You don't want to pound, I don't know if you can, but I would hate to pound it too far, then have to figure out how to pound it back up. I put anti-seize on these bolts and then tightened them down. I don't know the torque setting on that. I just tightened them nice and snug. Both of them actually went in pretty well. The passenger side is a little easier to get at. The driver's side isn't too bad, but there's just a little bit less room. I had also disconnected the muffler mounting bracket underneath the car down here. I don't know where it is. Too old to crawl under there unnecessarily. But there were 2 half-inch nuts that held a bracket that attached the exhaust to the bottom of the car. So I put those half-inch or 13 mil nuts back on. So those are on. Now moving on to, I bought new rocker arms and push rods from Melling. The push rods are easy. You just soak them in oil and drop them in. You can see them fall in place. Now, if you're reusing yours, you want to keep yours as a matched set. Otherwise, they just simply set in place like such. So I will get all of them bathed in oil and set in place, and then I'm moving on to the cams. Before we put the cam in, I've chosen not to replace my cams. That's probably the decision that was the hardest for me in this process. New cams, I think, are $400 a piece times 4, $1,600 I didn't want to spend. So I'm putting these back in. Overall, they're in pretty good shape. I've wiped them clean. When I took them out, I labeled it passenger PI for passenger intake, but it's also cast into this RI for right intake. So I've double checked that the rocker arms are covered with oil. I soaked them in oil. Everything seems to be sitting right. I took assembly lube and coated all of the journals or bearings for the cam, and then put an extra dab in there. Just don't want anything to be dry upon startup. So now it's time to set this in carefully, like so. And I need to orient it. There we go. So it's sitting right now. The 2 holes are up, which should indicate the top dead center position. It also rotates smoothly, and there's a dimple. So that hole is up, that hole is up, and there is the timing mark dimple, and you can see the cam is relaxed, which means it's not pushing a valve down. I think we will have the same situation in the exhaust cam. Over here, 1 or both of these are under load in the top dead center position. So I'm gonna work on installing the other 4. And then I have all of the cam journals in a row here the way they came off, but it's also labeled. Sorry, I don't know if you can see that. 1 exhaust, 2 exhaust, the arrow is towards the front, 3 exhaust, 4 exhaust. So that would be my 1 exhaust, 2 exhaust, 3 exhaust, 4 exhaust. 1 intake, 2 intake, 3 intake, 4 intake, and so on. All right, so I'm gonna get them set and I will torque them after they're all in. Okay, time to start torquing down the bearing caps. You may have seen me with my impact driver tightening these. I did not tighten them at all. I just simply very gently drove them down until the head got close to the cap, just to save myself some time. The torque spec for these is 89 inch-pounds. I'm going to follow the same pattern I followed with the head gasket, where I'll kind of go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So just kind of a spiral. So that's the plan I'm going to do. Same thing with all 4 of them. On the driver's side, which would be the left side, because a couple of the lobes were pushing on the rocker and therefore pushing against the spring of the valve, it just made me uneasy tightening them down, and I wasn't sure if that would affect the torque specs. So on the intake, from the direction I'm facing, I rotated the cam counterclockwise about 20 degrees, just so it's in a relaxed position now. And on the exhaust cam, I ended up rotating it maybe 70 degrees clockwise. So now all of the lobes were relaxed, and once I have them torqued down, I will kind of put a crescent wrench on these hex flats and tighten them back up. So now comes my torquing sequence, which is slow and methodical. All right, time to shift to installing the timing chain system. Frankly, the other night I did the chain that goes from the crank to the idler pulley, and there is a tightener, I forget what that's called, drawing a blank right now, tensioner right there, and a guide on this side, very easy to install, and then another chain that goes from the crank down to the oil pump, and I have shop cloth in there just to keep all the bolts I'm dropping from falling into the oil pan. That's all fairly straightforward. So now I'm working on the timing. Basically, you're going to run the left chain from this sprocket around this phaser, and back down. And to set that, Melling makes it fairly easy once you understand it. Took me too long because I did it wrong the first time. The 2 chains are identical. There is a bronze looking link, and then if you go up to the other end, there are 2 that are blue. You need to take the bronze one. This is my old sprocket, so I just have this one. It's identical to that, except it's old, but it's much easier to see. So the right bank runs off of this cog, and you can see that there is an arrow here for the front cog and an arrow here for the back cog. So the the brass link needs to go on this tooth. Then the blue link needs to go on the tooth that lines up with this slot and has the dimple in it. So that's the intake phaser. On the exhaust phaser, it is right there. You can see the little triangle at the end of the groove. So you put the 3 of those in place. To get it all to fit, I would basically get this one in place and then run it up to get it on this one. And you may need to put a crescent wrench on here to adjust this slightly back and forth. And the same thing over here, adjust it a little bit, and also getting it in these slides. So I will put it together and show you what it looks like. All right, so the 2 timing chains are installed. This goes really super fast when it's like the 8th time you've done it in the same evening. But here's the things to check, the things you'll know when you get it right. The first one is on the idler pulley, the right bank gold bronze chain lines up with, I don't know if I can get a view of it, that arrow. Oh, you can just see it. Oh, look at that, right there. There's the arrow. The other copper brass-ish looking chain is right there, and you can, if my light was in a better spot, you could see that arrow. So those are two critical things to test. Then the chain goes up and around. The blue link matches that little triangle right there. The next blue link matches that little round timing dot there. The chain goes back down through the guide. The other chain comes up, does the same thing, hits the dot there, hits the timing mark there, and goes back down. So that is a couple important things to check. The next important things to check are that you installed the cam phasers correctly. So the dot by my fingernail there is on the phaser, and this is the one on the camshaft, and they line up. Over here, you can see the two of them line up here. Now on the driver's side, and I verified this with, so it would be the left side, I verified this with a video online that somebody else had the same situation. These two dots line up right about with the center line of the cam. On the exhaust cam, they're actually in a little bit. I kind of expected them to be right in line, but they're not. They're in maybe 5-10 degrees. Now check your passenger side. Make sure the dots align and the dots align. And on this, the two sets of dots are both slightly outside of center. So if center on the cam is here, these are out a little bit. Center on the cam is right here. These are out just a little bit. And that, my friends, is, I think, a correctly timed chain on the engine. Next, you're going to tighten these bolts on the end of the cam phaser to 118 foot-pounds. You're going to do that with a torque wrench and also by putting an adjustable wrench on the cam and holding it there. Do not trust these to hold it back. That's not what they're intended for. So torque all four of those to 118-inch foot-pounds. With the timing chain all done, I can pull my rags out of the bottom here. Now we can pull the pins on our chain tensioners. I'm a little nervous to do this, but here we go. 1, 2, and the long one, 3. So those are done. Set them on the bench. All right, I threw my crank pulley on there, and now we are going to just crank the engine over a few good turns. And here the compression building. Just make sure none of the valves are hitting or been too busy watching things to actually count. I'm feeling good about that. I'm about to install the timing cover. So you're gonna wanna put bead of sealant all the way around the outside, around your bolt holes. This is where the head joint to the block is, around that bolt hole, and a little bit on the timing chain adjuster, and then some across the bottom. Make sure you hit the corners, and then also, again, this joint where the head matches the block. Put a little bit in each of those. There's a dowel right here and a dowel right there that will hold the timing cover on. So we'll want to set it in place and then push it forward to install it. Right, here we go. Oh, I forgot to say, I put a little assembly lube around the end of the crank here. We do not want the crankshaft to go into the front main seal dry and have it be dry on startup. Never want anything dry on startup. That went super easy. All right, now we've got lots of bolts to put in and then torque. My Felpro gasket kit came with this gasket for this coolant crossover piece. But I have no groove for this gasket to go in. And on the timing cover where it goes, there's no groove either. So I'm gonna make the assumption, I hope this is correct, that this must be for a different model of this engine that might have had a different cover. And so I'm going to put silicone on there instead and then install this. Okay, so I have all the bolts in, and I've gone around with a ratchet and just snugged all of them up. Not quite to torque value, but close. And now when I go back and do it with torque wrench, that should even out all of the gasket, because the first couple screws probably went, I don't know, didn't pull down quite as hard, or the first few screws will probably start to come loose as the rest of the screws got tightened down. The other thing I did that I'd recommend is get all of the screws on the face of it started, then go back down and do the 5 in the upper oil pan and torque those down, and that'll pull the cover down a little bit, seat that, squeeze out the silicone, and then go through and torque these. And as you torque them, I recommend taking a paint pen and just putting a dab of paint on the head of the bolt so that you know that one's been torqued, and when you're done you can go around and double check all of them to make sure you didn't miss any. It just takes a second, but seems like a good practice. And these go to 106 inch-pounds. I highly recommend doing that with a paint pen. It just gives you peace of mind that you're not missing any. And then you can go back with a mirror and just double check that there aren't any hidden underneath here that you missed. Looking pretty good. All right, gotta keep moving. Okay, so I just put the harmonic balancer pulley on the end of the crank. Couple things I want to note. One, mistakes I made earlier. One is I put lubrication on the end of the crankshaft because I didn't want to put that seal in dry, but the crank doesn't touch the front main seal. It's the harmonic balancer. So make sure you put oil or assembly lube on the harmonic balancer. The other thing is I torqued all of these valve cover bolts to 106 inch-pounds. There are a couple of them that have a different torque setting. They're all pretty close. I over torqued a couple of them just slightly. I'm not overly worried about it. For this harmonic balancer, it's 30 foot-pounds plus 105 degrees, I think it was. Let me double check. Yes, 30 foot-pounds plus 105 degrees. This is going to be a fun one to do by myself because that's a pretty high torque setting. So I've got my holder here with a ratchet set against the front differential. And now I'm going to see if I can get a little bit more than a quarter of a turn out of this without everything popping loose and flying all over. It's probably going to take multiple tries, but a lot of guys will just run it in with an impact wrench. There goes my flashlight. I thought about running it in with my impact wrench. I figure I might as well try to do it right. All right, so 90 degrees is going to be about a full 105 is going to be about a full swing there. And my ratchet fell off. All right, try number 2. Okay. My channel locks is clamped onto my front differential, which just locks my ratchet in place. I need a way to hold that on there. That would help. There we go. There's my quarter turn. Okay, that's about 90. Need 15 degrees more. There we go. Where there's a will, there's a way. Gotta love it. I just recorded a whole video and didn't hit start. The reality of putting this one in is it kind of bumps into this transmission dipstick. You gotta pull this emissions line kind of out of the way a little bit, and then it will go in the back. It needs to go about a ½ inch too far towards the firewall, and then it will drop down over the top of the passenger exhaust cam, right where that PCV valve mounts in the back. Once you get that dropped down, the front will get close, then it'll be able to pull back towards the front and get it in place, and now we can tighten it down and then torque it. All right, passenger side valve cover is on. I did succeed in getting the PCV valve installed in the back, which feels good to have done. There also is one sensor, I don't know what it is, it attaches to a little bracket on the back of the head that has a wire that goes to it. There's one in the back of the head for both blocks. Once the valve cover in the head is installed, you can't see that sensor really much at all anymore. A little bit if you look kind of right down in this angle. So don't forget that wire to hook that back on. Next, I'm going to put these, I don't know what these sensors are called, that go on the front of the valve cover. Hopefully you marked them. This one is the passenger center. So we'll install those into the new seals. Fits better if you take the old gasket off first instead of putting the new one on. And I should clean it. Passenger side is done. These are tightened up. I just snugged them up gently. Don't over tighten them because the screws go into plastic. I did not check a torque value. So now it's time to move on to the driver's side. Pretty much the same procedure. So let's go to it. So to torque the lower intake in, you just make sure you clean all your surfaces. You got your new gaskets in, and then wipe down all the surfaces with brake cleaner, set it in place carefully, and you can just run the screws down in with a drill or something. But then you're torquing the lower intake to 106. That's going into the aluminum block. And then you want to, when you put the upper intake on, the screws I think are going into plastic, so that's lighter. I think that's an 89, that's 89 foot-pounds. So just be careful that you don't strip those out. And then your intakes are in. Next, I put the coil packs in, tightened up the 10mm bolts on each one. Now I'm working on all the accessories. So the power steering pump and the compressor I installed earlier. You've got 2 idler pulleys that just screw into the block. Probably did those about the same time you did the timing chain cover. This is the tensioner. There's a long bolt on the top and a short bolt on the bottom that goes into that cap in the right lower corner of the block. I recommend running the belt without the alternator in and without this bracket that holds the alternator in. Then I just ran a bungee cord or a strap to hold the serpentine belt in place. Then I think you put a large 1/2-inch socket in there to compress the idler to get the belt to go on the alternator. It is a little bit tricky. The serpentine belt runs in kind of a cross or a plus pattern. So the belt comes down from the alternator and there's 1, 2, 3, 4 kind of idlers, and then 4 things on the outside that are driven by it. So the alternator belt comes down, goes around an idler, then it goes out around the compressor for the air conditioning, then back in around the water pump, which kind of acts as an idler, then down under the crank, then back up around the tensioner, then out to the power steering, back in around an idler, and then up around the alternator. So we'll work on putting all those in. To loosen the tension, the belt tensioner, you put a 1/2-inch drive ratchet in that square, and you need a pretty long breaker bar. I worked with about a 4-foot breaker bar to get that thing to swing a little bit, and that gives you enough slack that you can get the belt over top of the alternator. Tightened up the 4 bolts. I think it's 2 15s and a couple 13s. Just tighten that up. Next, I am going to just start very carefully and slowly unzip stripping all of the wiring harness and everything across the back and starting to lay that down, hooking up the excuse me, the injector harness, wiring, and then the upper intake will go on, and all of the wires to the coil packs. I have one that goes on the back of the head I need to remember yet. Make sure you, it's just an easy thing to overlook. Make sure you've got a new filter in, that this is tightened down, that your drain plug is in the bottom, that is tight. And then, you know, you got to put oil and coolant in before you get started. So I'm just going to work on dropping all this in place slowly. To double, triple, quadruple check everything to make sure that I don't miss hooking a wire up. I'm slightly paranoid and anxious about that. If you're this far in the process, you're getting close. So wiring harness was pretty easy to hook back up. It was overwhelming at first, but basically the cords will want to go back to the position they were in, and then just start in the end and keep looking for plugs. Make sure you don't miss any along the way. This one goes all the way down to beneath the Jeep and to the back. So don't forget to attach those all the way. These go to the alternator. There's another couple that go this direction, hook up to here, and hook up to the, I'm drawing a blank on the name of that right now. Then the upper intake goes on. Then all that's left is the battery tray and all the wires associated with that, and then fill it up with fluids. I had the most luck getting the battery tray out by disconnecting this large plug and then moving the power steering out of the way, which gave a whole lot more room for the battery tray to come out. So I'm going to work on carefully putting all these back together, and then I'll be on to fluids. All right, everything is back together. Fender liners are in. Everything's buttoned up. Engine cover's not on. I'm going to leave that off just so I can watch things. 6 quarts going in of Mopar SAE 5W20. Reassembly actually went pretty well. I don't know if I said this at the beginning, but something that I would recommend is just take a lot of pictures with your phone along the way, snapshots of things, so you can go back. I took probably 10, 15 pictures, snapshots besides the video. Then I only ended up going back and looking at 2 or 3 of them just to figure out, does this hose go under that hose, or most of it you can figure out as well. So that should do it for oil. I've got a new filter in. Time for coolant. Now it's time for the coolant. Mopar pre-diluted antifreeze. It's already pre-diluted 50-50. So time to fill the radiator. I have the reservoir full already. And then I assume once I let it run, I will take the cap off before it gets too hot and just keep filling it up as the water pump circulates it through the engine and the bubbles work their way out. Usually you got to let it warm up a little while so the thermostat opens and the water flows. Until then, it doesn't pull the fresh coolant out of the radiator. And then the nerve-wracking part of turning the key and praying that it starts. All right, time for that moment of truth. Turn the key. I'm not surprised. Knew it all along. So that's gonna wrap up this video. It was a long one. Thanks for following along. I really hope that this was helpful for you. It took a lot of hours for me to film it and edit it, and what makes it enjoyable is if it really helps people. Jeep's been on the road for a few days now, and it's running great. I don't have any leaks, no weird noises. Really happy with the results of it. So if you're into this neck deep in a project like this, I hope it's going well for you too. And I hope all of the detail was helpful. Good luck with your project. Have a great day. Thanks for tuning in to Third Stall Garage. If it was helpful, give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. That would help me out as well. Have a great day.